make it be like that.
Make you not there, Yaramo, Yaramo, Yaramo.
Live out like that, make it be like that.
All right, the front pages are ready for us this morning. So before the day gets busy, let's pause for the stories that is already making noise. The papers are also out and the headlines are bold. And behind all of these front pages is a story that worth your attention this morning. So what are Nigerians newspaper saying this morning? We will be going there today. Good morning, Ibadan, and good morning, Nigeria. You are tuning to Newspaper Review on JDN Radio 101.5 FM, the only radio station that is broadcasting for all. I am Abiodun Sampson, and this morning, Wednesday, the 19th of August, 2026, we will be taking a fresh look at the headlines commanding attention across the dailies this morning. And on the stand with me this morning, I have the Nigerian Tribune, I have the Punch newspaper, I have the Nation, and also Daily Post. So we will be checking out the stories that made it to the front page for this morning. So this morning, I will be starting with the Punch newspaper with the headlines that made it to the front page. So I will be starting with this. Presidential election, Tinubu Obi, other signs peace path as 2027 campaign begins today. Off-cycle pools, Jonathan decries government show of force. Salary crisis, NLC warns of fresh health sector strike. Federal government, states, councils share record of 3 trillion naira in July. 36 states budget jumps 47% to 40 trillion naira. Capital spending falls. A Nigerian pay more for cement than African neighbors. And this is coming from FCCPC. NDLEA nabs alleged cocaine baron fleeing to Paris. And also on the Punch newspaper, no alliance. Adeleke denies ADC role in re-election. And also, more beats Niger man to death over theft allegation. And moving forward to the Nation, this morning I have this headline that says, parties commit to clean pools, issued base campaign. FCCPC pro price manipulation as cement eats 15,000 naira per bag. FAAC shares 2.55 trillion naira June revenue among federal government, states, and local governments. And also on the Nation, U.S. lifts 12-year restriction on Nigerian vessel. And moving forward from there to the Guardian newspaper, candidates, parties doubt peace accord as election campaigns begins. 2027, INEC projects over 100 million registered voters to deploy 1.4 million ad hoc service. Obi seek end to killing as fresh attack claims over 58 live in Sokoto, Benue and Plateau. And still on the Guardian, federal government, states, local governments shares 3 trillion as July revenue rises by 658.087 billion naira. And those are the headlines that is commanding the morning on the newspaper for this morning. If you're just tuning in, it's to the newspaper review on JDN Radio 101.5 FM. And I will be starting with this headline and giving you stories that comes along with it. And I'm on the Punch newspaper for this morning, the 19th of August, 2026. Presidential election, Tinubu Obi order sign peace pact as 2027 campaign begins today. Political parties and presidential and National Assembly candidates on Tuesday signed the first national peace accord on issue-based campaign ahead of the 2027 general election, pledging to shun violence, hate speech, misinformation, personal attacks, and other conduct capable of undermining the electoral process. The accord was signed in Abuja at a ceremony organized by the National Peace Committee in partnership with the Caucus Center barely 24 hours before the statutory commencement of public campaigns and rallies for the elections. The event brought together the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Joas Amopitan, political parties leader, presidential candidate, National Assembly candidate, the Inspector General of Police, Olatunji Disu, and representative of diplomatic community, among other stakeholders. Those who signed the accord includes President Bola Tinubu, represented by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, the Nigerian Democratic Congress presidential candidate, Peter Obi, the Social Democratic Party candidate, Adewale Adebayo, and his African Action Congress counterpart, Omoyele Sowore. And the story continues on the Punch newspaper for this morning. And still on the Punch newspaper for this morning, I have this headline that says, off-cycle pose, Jonathan decries government's show of force. Former President Goodluck Jonathan, the Defense Minister General Christopher Musa retired. The senior lawyers have called for reforms to Nigerian approach to election security, particularly in the massive deployment of security personnel and political mobilization witnessed during the off-cycle elections. Their separate position followed the August 15 OSHO state governorship election, where over 15,000 police personnel were deployed ahead of the polls amid the presence of several governors, political leaders, and other senior government officials. Jonathan, in a statement titled OSHO and the Need to Set New Boundaries for Political Conduct in Off-Cycle Elections, commended the Independent National Electoral Commission, security agencies, political parties, and OSHO voters for the peaceful conduct of the election. However, he raised concerns over what he described as a growing and unwholesome practice in which serving governors, senior political office holders, party leaders, and other influential government functionaries converge on states holding elections with large numbers of aides and security personnel. Jonathan said the growing practice whereby serving governors, senior political office holders, party leaders, and other influential government functionaries, accompanied by large numbers of aides and every security details from outside a state, converge on states where elections are being conducted, raises an issues that demand national attention. And the story continues on the Punch newspaper for this morning. If you're just tuning in, it's still the newspaper review on JDN Radio 101.5 FM. And still on the punch for this morning, salary crisis, NLC warns of fresh health sector strike. The Nigerian Labour Congress has urged the federal government to urgently resolve the lingering salary dispute with the joint health sector unions, warning that failure to revive negotiations could trigger another industrial crisis in the health sector. The NLC made the call in a letter dated August 6, 2026, addressed to the Minister of Labour and Employment and signed by its president, Joe Ajaero. The letter followed a July 31st communication by the Joint Health Sector Union expressing frustration over the slow pace of effort to resolve its demands, particularly the adjustment of the consolidated health salary structures. The NLC said it was concerned that the agreement memoranda of understanding and collective bargaining agreements reached with the government over the years had yet to fully resolve the grievances of the health workers. It says we are similarly concerned that years after signing the MOUs, terms of agreement, and CBAs, that is collective bargaining agreement, in addition to promises and assurance from appropriate authorities, members of JOISHU have been ignored or abandoned, Ajaero stated. The Labour Center therefore appealed to the Labour Minister to intervene and ensure that negotiation resume immediately, while also urging him to engage the Presidential Committee on Salaries on the matter. And the story continues on the Punch newspaper for this morning. It's to the newspaper review and moving forward to the nation for this morning with this headline that says FCCPC probes price manipulation as cement eats 15,000 naira per bag. Cement manufacturers are under the searchlight of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, over rooftop prices of cement. The agency has confirmed. It says the probe allowed an extensive industrial-wide investigation that suggested possible manipulations of product prices in the Nigerian market. The FCCPC stated that findings from a 3-month cross-border study by its Anti-Competitive Practice Department, ACP, undertaken in response to widespread public complaints over the high cost of cement, provided reasonable grounds for probes of the cement manufacturers. According to the Commission, subsequent to the findings, it has issued notice of commencement of investigation and summons to producer to the key players in the sector. With the summons, the companies are required to provide information and records relating to, among other matters, their pricing methodologies, productions and capacity utilization, export and relevant commercial relationships. 3 companies accounted for more than 90% of Nigerian cement productions. They are Dangote Cement PLC, HMB Nigerian PLC, formerly known as Lafarge African PLC, and Bois Cement PLC. FCCPC states that its actions were sequel to concerns raised over the comparatively high retail price of cement in the local market compared to other markets despite the country's substantial limestone deposit, significant domestic production capacity, and reported surplus in store capacity relative to domestic consumption. And this story continues on The Nation for this morning. On The Nation, if you're just tuning in, it's still the newspaper review, and I'm still on The Nation for this morning. While we are launching National Food Bank by First Lady, First Lady Oluremi Tinubu yesterday explained the motive behind the National Community Food Bank program being launched across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The scheme is designed to tackle food insecurity and malnutrition among vulnerable households, especially children, pregnant women, and nursing mothers, the First Lady said. She spoke while launching the Southwest Zonal edition of the NCFB at the June 12 Cultural Center in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital. Senator Tinubu urged governors in the Southwest to take ownership of the initiative and ensure its sustenance beyond the current administration. And the story continues on the nations for this morning. And still on the nations for this morning, I have this news. U.S. lift 12 years restrictions on Nigerian vessels. The United States Coast Guard, USCG, has lifted the 12 years condition of entry imposed on vessels arriving in the United States from Nigeria. It's marking a major breakthrough for the country's maritime sector. The Minister of Maritime and Blue Economy, Dr. Adegboyega Oyetola, announced the development, describing it as a significant milestone in the federal government effort to strengthen maritime security, improve ports' competitiveness, and enhance Nigerian position in the global maritime industry. The condition of entry, which came into the effect on June 25, 2014, required vessels bound for the U.S. that had called a designated Nigerian port within their previous 5 port calls to undergo additional security measures and enhance scrutiny before gaining access to U.S. waters. Oyetola said the decision by the USCG was a strong affirmation of the progress Nigeria has made in strengthening its maritime security architecture and implementing the international ship and port facility security codes, its ports and maritime facilities. And the story continues on the nations for this morning, the 19th of August, 2026. Moving forward to the Guardian newspaper, and I have this headline that says, candidates parties doubt peace accord as election campaigns begins. Presidential candidate yesterday signed the National Peace Accord ahead of the 2027 general elections, but opposition figure questions the path's effectiveness, with some expressing doubt that it will go beyond a ceremonial commitment to ensuring peaceful and credible elections. This came as President Bola Tinubu declared that the election must not be treated as a do-or-die affair, while the National Peace Committee, led by the former head of state, General Abdul Salami Abubakar, urged political parties to shun character assassination, fake news, insult, and inflammatory rhetoric. Opposition presidential candidates Peter Obi, Adewale Adebayo, and Omoyele Sowore expressed varying degrees of skepticism over the accord's ability to prevent electoral violence. And the story continues on the Guardian newspaper for this morning. And still on the Guardian newspaper, 2027, INEC projects over 100 million registered voters to deploy 1.4 million ad hoc staff. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has projected that the number of registered voters in Nigeria will exceed 100 million ahead of the 2027 general elections. With this, it plans to deploy approximately 1.4 million ad hoc personnel across more than 176,000 polling units nationwide for the election. Meanwhile, Garba Shehu, the Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity to the late President Muhammadu Buhari, has disclosed that former chairman of INEC, Professor Atairu Jega, gave Nigerian its best election since the annulled June 12, 1993 coup. Chairman of the INEC Information and Voters Education Committee, IVEC, Mohammed Aruna, disclosed yesterday in Abuja at the Commission's joint implementation meeting of the Department of Voters Education and Publicity, FEP, and Gender Inclusivity that the existing voters registered stood at more than 93 million, adding that the figure was expected to cross the 100 million mark when the nationwide continuous voters registration exercise is finalized. And this story continues on the Guardian newspaper for this morning. To the newspaper review on JDN Radio 101.5 FM. And do not forget that we are live on Facebook and YouTube on JDN Radio 101.5 FM. So if any of the headlines have sparked any reactions, you can do well to drop your comment, or you can call into the studio line on 07048 001015 or 08022102163. And I have this comment on Facebook. Dr. Missy, she said, any government that cannot live up to its basic responsibility of protecting lives and property is a failure. And she further said that Nigeria is not at war, yet its citizens are slaughtered daily in their homes, farms, markets, and churches. And she further said some communities have been wiped out and millions fled their homes to IDPs. And she further says surviving without sufficient food, water, and medical care, instead of dealing with terrorists, they are pampered, rehabilitated, and integrated into the forces. And that is our contribution this morning on the newspaper review. And moving from there to the Guardian newspaper that I will be taking for the newspaper review this morning. And the headline says federal government, states, local governments shares 3 trillion naira as July revenue rises by 658.087 billion. The Federation Account Allocation Committee has said it has shared 3 trillion July revenue among the federal, state, and local government areas in the country. This is even as the committee reported that the rise in the amount shared was driven by an improved collection performance across oil and non-oil statutory sources, resulting in a gross statutory revenue increase of 4.359 trillion in July 2026, up by 658.087 billion naira, or 17.8% above the 3.700 trillion naira collected in June 2026. FAAC, in a communique issued at the end of its August 2026 meeting held in Owerri, Imo State, however, noted that though gross value added tax revenue held broadly steady at 798.968 billion naira, and it recorded a marginal decline of 5.778 billion naira, that is 0.7% from 799.746 billion in June, suggesting that consumption tax receipts remain resilient month on month. And the story continues on the Guardian newspaper for this morning. if you are just tuning in, it's still the newspaper review, and we'll be calling it a wrap this morning. If any of the headlines been read out as pack or reactions and you want to contribute in one way or the other, do not worry that the newspaper review is coming in Yoruba language translation. That is on our phone Niroyin. So do well to join then, and also call in to express your own contribution on any of the headlines that have sparked or reactions. I remain Abiodun Samson, and do not forget that the newspaper review continues tomorrow, same time, 7:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. on JDN Radio 101.5 FM, and our phone Niroyin comes up shortly.